thank you guys so much for leading us in to worship tonight, and just so thankful for us to be able to have that opportunity to kind of get back to that and try to have some of that normal rhythm in our Wednesday night schedule. And I love that song too. It's such a classic song. It's been around for a while now. Your parents might have sung it whenever they were kids, but things like that endure. And songs like that endure because their lyrics just carry with them just such great truth. And I just love that lyric of, because he lives, I can face tomorrow. And so it's not I can face tomorrow because I know what's going to happen. It's not I can face tomorrow because I have all the answers. It's I face tomorrow because he lives, because I know him. And so I just love that song. So thank you guys for leading us in that. Well, tonight, as we kind of get move back over and continue our series through the Gospel of John, we're actually going to wrap that up tonight. But I don't know how you guys are when it comes to things like shopping. If you're buying something, how much research you put into something. But I like to put in a ton of research before I buy anything. And so if I'm going to buy, an appliance, if I'm going to buy any sort of electronic, if I'm going to buy like a new tool, I'm like one of those people that goes online and I'll use the compare and contrast feature that all of the different websites will have, so where you can like line up items by others, and you compare, well, hey, what does this model offer, what does this brand offer, how does this differ from one thing, what are some of the features that are part of these, and you can look at those. And so I kind of go in, and the reason I do this is because I have the assumption that in all of these options, if I can weigh all these options, I can figure out what the best thing for me to buy is. And it's up to me to figure out what that is based off of all the options and the price and everything that's available to me, to figure out what is the absolute best thing that I can spend and make the purchase with. And so, a few months ago, my mom moved into a new home, and she was shopping for a refrigerator, and so I was helping her out. And so we went to the store, and we were looking for a refrigerator for my mom. Now, I'm kind of simple. I don't like the super fancy things, but the definition of a refrigerator is that it refrigerates, that it keeps things frozen, and it keeps things cool. That is a primary purpose of a refrigerator being in your home. And so the price on a refrigerator varies quite a bit. I don't know if you've ever gone shopping for a refrigerator. My guess is you probably haven't. But just so you know what's available out there, there's a huge price range. From like a couple $100s to like thousands of dollars for a refrigerator. And what makes the difference in the price is all the incredible features that come with these refrigerators. Like, I don't know, it's insane the stuff that's on there. And so, it moved past like simple features like, hey, it's got an ice maker, or it has the ability to dispense water, but there's different price options based on how the doors fold out or what they do, the different drawer space that's in there. You've got all these different like settings that you can adjust. Some of them have TVs on them. So, say you're watching a game and you just really need a snack, well, you can walk in the kitchen, you can watch the game as you're opening your TV, and you can get weather updates and notes, and they have like these smart TVs, and so it's like having a phone on your TV, on your refrigerator, and you can actually look inside your refrigerator without even having to open it. And so I don't know, maybe that cuts down on cooling cost or operating cost of the refrigerator. I don't really know why that's a feature. Why you can't just open your refrigerator and see what's inside it for yourself. What is handy is they do have the ability with cameras to where you could be at the store and you can pull up your phone and you can look inside your refrigerator and say, hey, do we actually have ranch? I think we're going to need some ranch, and I think we might be out of that. And you can look in your refrigerator and know, hey, there's the ranch. I see it. We don't need more. So it's incredible, all these different features out there. And so as you're trying to weigh all these different options, one thing that really drives me crazy is whenever they make these different things and they don't really give a clear or measurable difference in the options, right? So they just use things like, well, it has an improved camera. Well, I don't want to know what improvement is. Like, what? That's not a descriptive word. It's not something I can measure. It's just improved. Well, how improved is it? Is it, are there more pixels? Is there better contrast? What type of improvements are we talking about, so that I can know, is it actually worth the amount of money that you're charging more? And so I'm trying to figure out, is it worth the cost? to use that feature. And so it frustrates me whenever I don't have a clear options there and I can't make what I think is the absolute best purchase. Right, so last week we looked at these I am statements that Jesus made in John chapter 14, right? So he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, right? So this is the very last of the I am statement. And last week we kind of focused on the first part of that, which was I am the way. Well, this week we're going to look at the truth, and it's going to wrap up our series. And so you might be saying, well, what about the last part of that, that I am the life? Well, that's actually what we did the very first week when we started this series, when we looked at the true vine. Contains with it the same idea of having life. And so, we've already looked at kind of that statement. And so it's been a long quarantine, I know. So if you missed that, go back and rewatch that and refresh yourself if you want to. But we're going to focus on the truth this week. And we're going to focus on what Jesus means when he says, I am the truth. Right? Because like his statement we looked at last week where he says, I am the way, by nature to say he is the truth is exclusive. And here's why. Because he isn't saying he's just some truth. He's not saying I have a portion of truth or I have some truth to offer you. He's saying, no, I am the truth, all the truth that is me, and there is no truth outside of me. And so what he's saying there is that for him to be the truth, by definition, to be the truth, there can be no other truth but him. Right? So if he is all the truth, there can be no other truths. Right? Because by definition, two things cannot be true at the same time. You can't say, well, you might say, well, I ate the last cookie, and I might say, well, no, you ate the last cookie. Both of those statements cannot be true at the same time. Right? Now, both of those could be false, and maybe one of them could be true, but neither can be true at the same time. Right? They can't both be true. Somebody ate the last cookie, and it can't be both of those things. And so now where it gets a little shaky is I might believe that you ate the last one, because whenever I went into the kitchen and I ate the cookies on the plate, I specifically left one cookie for you to eat. And then you came into the kitchen and you ate one, and you came to eat one, and all of a sudden there's no cookie on the plate, and so you assume that I ate the last of the cookies. And what we don't know is the dog came in and actually ate that last cookie, and so we're blaming each other. Right, and so what happened is both of our statements are false. Now, it doesn't mean that there's not truth, but both of those were false. And so there was a truth, and the truth is that the dog ate the cookie. Right, but what our culture tells us is that when we look at situations like that, based off of what we believe, we can have differing opinions. And what they're trying to tell us is that truth is subjective. Right, and we look at truth kind of like how we would look at ranking the best restaurant or picking the best cell phone. Right? What is the best cell phone? Well, for some people, they really like Android phones. Some people really like, Apple, and they like their operating system. Some people really like the super giant, basically a mini TV screens, and other people like the smaller ones that are easy to fit in your pocket. Right? And so for different people, the best phone is different. And in their mind, it is the best phone. That's why they bought it. But it's different for every person. And so this line of thinking leads us to the phrase of live your truth. And you may have heard this, where the idea is that we just understand the world differently, and we have different perspectives of the world. And because of that, we've been shaped in such a way to believe certain things. And really the truth just becomes a matter of perspective. And so we believe that there is no such thing as truth. And then we think, well, the only thing that is true is what fits our personal preference or our perspective. And so the thought that there is no truth really boils down to this idea, well, there's no standard to judge by, right? What's the standard? How do we know what the truth is? We can't actually know the truth, or, there isn't a truth that's available. That what's concrete, what I believe is true, might be different for you, and so you're using a different standard, and based off of a different standard, you see things differently. And so for whenever it comes down to our having religion or having faith, we have a different standard. Some people might prefer the Bible. The Bible is a source of truth. And some people might say, well, no, the Quran or the Book of Mormon or, Mao's Little Red Book or the sayings of Confucius, or maybe you just really like Ayn Rand. Whatever your desires are, there's 100 of other different standards that you go by. And in that case, you hear the language true for you, but not true for me. And it's just live your truth. Right? So what do we make of this? What do we make of this? Well, let's begin our assessment of what we're going to refer to as relativism, right? So relativism is this idea that there is no truth, and the reason there is no truth is because there's no standard by which to determine what is true. And so because there is no standard, truth becomes relative, hence the term relativism. And so let's look at an interaction that Jesus has in Matthew chapter 21. All right, so Matthew chapter 21, Jesus enters the temple, and it says, the chief priests and the elders of the people came up to him as he was teaching and said, by what authority are you doing these things, and who gave you this authority? Right, so they're looking at this, and they're judging the situation of Jesus, and they're saying, okay, Jesus, we need to know if you're true, and how we're going to determine if you are true is by a standard, the authority by which we're going to judge you for. So they're looking for an authority, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to look for a standard by which to judge Jesus. And so they say, well, who gave you this authority? And Jesus answers them, well, I will ask you one question, and if you tell me the answer, then I will tell you by what authority I do these things. And he says, well, the baptism of John, from where did it come? From heaven or from man? And so what happens is he presents this question. He says, okay, well, I'll answer for you, but you need to decide, where did the baptism of John come from? And did it come from heaven? Did God give him that authority, or did he give himself that authority? And so there's two options for him, and they begin to weigh these options, and in weighing the options, they really kind of reveal something about themselves. It says that they discuss among themselves, and they say, well, if we say from heaven, he will say to us, then why did you not believe him? But if we say from man, then we're afraid that the crowd, because they're going to say that John was a prophet, and they're going to say, no, he spoke from God, and so then they're going to be upset at us. So they answered Jesus, we don't know. And he said to them, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. Now look carefully what happens here, right? Jesus comes to them to take a stand on a simple truth claim. Either John's baptism is from heaven or it's from man. What's the truth here? There's two options. Both of those things can't be true. There has to be one. And he says, declare what you believe to be true. And they ponder and they say, well, John's baptism is from heaven, then we'll be shamed because Jesus will show that we're hypocrites because we're not, if we believe this baptism came from heaven, then we're not actually living like it. And so we'll be shamed. But if we say that it came from him, from John, then all of a sudden the crowd's going to rise up of us and there might be violence and, we might die. And so what's happening here is the priests don't use their mind to formulate the true answer about Jesus' question. What they use their minds instead to do is to reason which is going to be better for us. They're reasoning carefully, what's at stake for them in their reasoning, and what they're trying to deliberate on is not, hey, is truth going to come out? What they're reasoning and what they're concerned about is our reputation and is our life going to be safe. And so in doing so, they're saying we don't actually really care what the truth is. And they just don't want to be shamed and they don't want to be harmed. And so for them, truth is irrelevant. And it's guiding it's not guiding what they're going to say. And it doesn't matter whether John's baptism was from heaven or from man. What matters is that they don't be shamed and that they don't be harmed. And so they use language to cover their indifference to the truth by simply saying, we don't know. Right? The true answer there is they don't care. But instead they say, we don't know. And Jesus responds, well, neither will I tell you by what authority I do. In other words, he's saying, I'm not going to have serious conversations with people like you because Jesus is going to abominate that kind of arrogant and cowardly use of the human mind to not search for truth, and this cowardly use of human language to cover up their own pride and their own disregard for what is true. And so the claim that there is no one standard for truth and falsehood that is valid for everyone is rooted most deeply in this desire of our fallen human minds to want to be free from all authority, right? So we say there is no truth because there is no standard, and the truth is we're really more concerned about the fact that we don't want there to be any standard. We don't want there to be any sort of authority, and what we want to do in that is to be able to exalt ourselves and make our own choices. And really, if we think about it, the understanding that there is no truth is just full of contradictions, right? Think about that statement, that it's true that there is no truth. How can that statement be true? It contradicts itself, right? But for Jesus to say that he is the truth, there is no contradiction there unless he is in fact a liar, right? But because he is the truth, there's no contradiction, right? But on the other hand, just the statement of saying it's true that there is no truth just can never in any situation not be contradictory. And even practically thinking about this, who of us wouldn't be upset if after finishing studying for a test and going in and working on a test and answering all the questions and then getting our paper back and discovering, hey, we did all the answers right and we got all the right answers, but our teacher gave us a failing grade because from her perspective it was wrong. Or who wouldn't be upset if after scoring, the game-winning goal, and just before the buzzer goes off, that the ref kind of comes in and says, I'm going to take that point away because I believe, and in my mind, the goal happened after the buzzer. And you're saying, no, it happened before the buzzer. It was good. We would be so upset by that, right? So people don't embrace relativism or this idea that there is no truth because it's philosophically satisfying, because the statement in itself is contradictory, and they don't embrace it because it's practically speaking convenient. They do it because physically and emotionally it's gratifying to us, and it provides the cover that we need to be able to do what we want. And that's what we see here in the chief priests and the elders. They don't care about the truth. They only care about what's good for them. Therefore, their minds and their words simply function as useful means of avoiding shame and harm, and they're covering up their self-centeredness and their own cowardice. And that's the deepest root of what's at stake here with relativism, of this idea that there is no truth. And here's the effects of this. So say we carry this out, and we think about this. Okay, what is a world where there is no truth? And it is all just relative. What does it do? Well, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to destroy morality, right? And the basic definition of morality is this: that there's a right and there's a wrong, and that we should do what is right. But in order for us to know what is right or what is wrong, we have to have some standard by which to judge what is right and wrong. And so if we're saying there's no truth out there and there's no standard out there, then how can we ever judge what is truly right or wrong? And so we might say, well, man, murder is bad. And if there is truth, then yes, that's true, right? If we have a standard and we say, well, if any time you kill, that's a bad thing. If anybody dies, that's a bad thing. But if there is no truth, there is no standard, and what is right is only what you deem is right, and it's only about perspective, well, maybe the person that committed the murder had by their perspective, it was a good thing, and therefore it must be good. But what Jesus is going to say on the other hand is he says, no, I am the truth. I am that standard. And he says, if by on contrast to this, he says, if you love me, if you love the truth, keep my commands. He says that in verse 14. And we look at this and it gets kind of confusing as we think of situations like, well, we know that stealing is wrong. We're taught this when we're very little. You shouldn't steal, right? But then we get in these kind of situations. Well, maybe it's okay to steal if you're poor, you're starving, and you need to feed your kids or something like that. Maybe it's okay to steal in that situation, because it's not a great thing to do, but this is a worse thing to do. So we kind of use comparative situations to do this thing. And Jesus is saying, keep my commandments. And what he's saying is based off of love me. Do you love me? And the idea there is that when we love him, that we're surrendered to him, that he also takes care of us, right? And so morality falls when there is no truth. And the next thing is it kind of leads into the next point where language and action just simply becomes manipulative, right? Because if everything's about perspective, then all the language and all the action that we're trying to do is to try to manipulate and get people to be on our side, to see things from our perspective. And so when morality is destroyed, what we do is we cover that up through language, right? In culture where truth is esteemed as something that's objective and external to ourselves, right? Where we say there is a moral standard, where there is a moral truth, where there is a standard that we should all hold to, and that's outside of us, regardless of what anybody else thinks. This is what is, right? When we live as a society that embraces that, then then language holds the honorable place of expressing and carrying and transmitting that precious cargo of truth. In fact, a person's use of language is assessed on the basis of whether or not it corresponds to truth and the beauty of the reality that he expresses. But when objective truth vanishes and we just kind of live in this fog of everything is just what everybody feels, it doesn't submit to objective external reality. What we do is we simply use language to create our own reality. And it no longer just serves to display truth. Now it seems only to obtain the preferences of the person who is speaking. And this gives rise to us just to use every manner of spin. With it, we're going to spin things in whatever is going to be favorable for us. And the goal of language is no longer communication of reality, but the manipulation of reality. And so language and our actions become manipulative. And then what's worse is that this own pride that we hide, where we're saying that we're doing all of this, and as we hide it under a false humility, right? That we're making all these actions where we've esteemed our own perspective and our own reality to top, that we hide that under actually being humble, right? But truth that is rooted in God's objective reality and word, right? Where truth that's rooted in Jesus is an unchanging reality, where we as humans submit to it, right? It's outside of us and we submit to it. And so knowing the truth is a humble task because it requires us to put ourselves under this reality and to submit to it. And so understanding is literally taking the humble position to stand under the truth and let it be our rule, right? So to be ruled by God as truth it is humility. That's what it means to be humble. But there's a position there, but the position that there is no truth poses as humility by saying that I'm just not smart enough to know what truth is, or I'm just not smart enough to know if there's any universal truth. And so we pretend like that's such a humble thing. Well, I'm smart enough to admit, I'm humble enough to admit that I don't know all the answers, and I'm humble enough to know that, I don't have it all together, and so, hey, maybe I don't have it all figured out, so, I'm just going to do what I think is best. And it sounds humble, but look carefully what's happening. It's like as if a servant was saying, well, I'm not smart enough to know which person is my master, or even if I have a master. And so the result is that I don't have a master, and that I can now be my own master. And that's the reality of what happens to these relativists. Right? What they, in claiming to be too lowly to know the truth, they exalt themselves as the supreme arbiter of what they think they can do. And it's not humility, it's the essence of pride. And the only way pride can be conquered in us is to believe in the truth and to let it rule us and to submit to it. Right? So here's what it means when Jesus says, I am the truth. He's the standard. Here's what he has to say. Here's what the Bible has to say. We're going to look at Colossians as we kind of wrap up tonight. But here's 4 things he has to say, the 4 big questions that are in the world right now. And number 1 being, who am I? Number 2 being, why am I here? Number 3 being, what is wrong with this world? And number 4 being, what is wrong? How can we make it right? Right? So who am I? Why am I here? What is wrong with this world? And how can we make the world right again? Right? And here's what truth has to say. Let's first look at who I am. So let's look at Colossians chapter 1. We're going to look starting in verse 15. It says that Christ is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authority, all things created through him and for him. Right now, some of you guys might be puzzled. Okay, well, how does this text answer the question, who am I? How does this verse answer that? Well, the answer is that you cannot figure out who you are until you first discovered who he is. That Jesus is the image of the invisible God, right? That his purpose is that he images the God that cannot be seen. He puts an image to that. And so he's the exact representation of the Father, and he's the picture of God in human flesh, and he is God on this earth. He is the God with us. He is the God among us. He is the Almighty, and for him all things were created. He is the creator of all things. And so which things did Jesus create? Well, he created all things in heaven and earth. So who am I? Well, the Bible says here that we are a creation of God. Right? And it says in the Psalms that we're the crowning glory of the creation of God. And as a result, I have inherent dignity. I have worth. I have value. And what Jesus says is that Jesus says is that I can't comprehend ideas because you are my crowning glory, because you are my creation. I put some worth into you. I can't comprehend ideas like racism or classism or eugenics. Those things aren't compatible with me because I'm the standard. And when you line those things up against me, they just don't work. And so they're proven to be false. And you think about this, slavery for many years was a morally acceptable thing. It was widely practiced in our world, and it was, the law of the land. It was allowed. People could do this, and people thought it was morally okay. And they thought, well, just because somebody's a different skin color, just because somebody's a different race, just because somebody's, from a different place, or a different social standing or whatever, it's okay for us to treat them as slaves and for me to have them and own them and possess them as human beings. And the Bible held the statement from the very beginning that God created man in his image. And so from the very beginning, God has held this standard that all people have value long before our culture ever embraced that standard. And the next thing it says is, he says, why am I here? Let's look at Colossians verses 16 and 18. Right? Because the culture basically says that the reason we're here, there's really no rhyme or reason to it. That we basically just come out of, the apparently just random chemicals started firing, and there was some sort of primordial ooze, and out of that, the earth basically farted, and here comes all of the people, and just by random chance we're here, and so there's no real reason, there's no real purpose for us being here, and so basically all we can do is just make the most of the time that we've been given, because we're all going to die someday, and there's nothing waiting for us on the other side. And so while we're here, let's consume and let's enjoy, and that's why we're all here. But Jesus looks at the question of why we're all here, and he answers it very differently. He says in verse 16, he says, all things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body of the church. He's the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. Right? It says that all things were created through him and for him. The ultimate purpose of all things that are created, which includes us, is to bring Christ glory and honor, that he might have supremacy in all things. So who am I? Well, I'm the crown and the glory of the creation of God. Why am I here? To bring glory and honor to the Lord Jesus Christ. That's why I exist. That's why you exist. That's why we all exist. That's why he breathed into us the very breath of life, is so that we might go and glorify us. You might say, well, that's very self-centered of God. That, why would he do this? We're just here to glorify him. He doesn't really care about us. He created us. Is that really a life worth living? Well, think about what we've looked at as we've gone through this series, where Jesus is saying, I am, and in doing so, he's comparing himself to God. The original statement where God reveals his holy name, Yahweh, I am, and he says, I am God. By saying that, he's saying, I am God. And then he goes on to say, I am, fill in the blank, 7 different times. And in doing so, he's saying, I am God, and God is like this. And in doing so, what we're learning is more of who God is. We're seeing better pictures and grasping who God is. But what's also happening is by learning who God is, we also learn better who we are. Right? And so he says, I am the bread of life. When we looked at that statement of I am the bread of life, the whole theme there is that we need to consume this bread so that we might survive, that we need to eat to live. But here's the thing about it. Bread is delicious, right? It's like somebody telling you, hey, you're going to starve to death. The way that you don't starve to death is by eating your favorite ice cream. I mean, that's not a bad thing. Who would tell you that to survive, you have to consume your favorite thing? That's awesome, right? And he's saying, I'm the light of the world. And the theme there is that we might be able to see so that we don't stumble around in darkness. But at the same time, what the light does is it reveals all the beauty that's around us. And he says, I'm the gate, I'm the shepherd. And the idea there is that we need protection, right? That he creates this pen for us. And in doing so, that we're protected. And he says, I'm the shepherd. And it's the shepherd that guards and protects the sheep from the wolves. But in doing so, he's bringing us to green pastures, and he's bringing us to quiet waters. And then he also says, I'm the true vine, right? That we need to be connected to him. If we're not connected to the true vine, that we're going to wither away. But it's not just about being connected to the vine. He's saying that we get to produce fruit, right? We get to produce fruit. We as branches get to be attached to the vine, and in doing so, we now get the incredible joy of being able to produce fruit in our lives, right? So he's saying, be connected to me, do all these things, and to bring him glory, but there's such great benefits and joys to us. And so he's saying, you're here to bring me glory. And then moving along, what's the next? The next one was, what is wrong with this world? Well, obviously something's got to be wrong with this world. I mean, we all kind of know it. We know that there's broken things. I mean, who of us has not been discouraged or upset or frustrated with the way their day turned out, the way their year's going, frustrated with the homework they've been given, maybe disappointed right now is a great word to sum up. Maybe how a lot of you guys are feeling about what's going on in the world. And so there's some brokenness. We understand there's brokenness. In a world where there's no truth, the problem that we say is, well, I sense that there's brokenness, and I reason that the brokenness is just because I'm uncomfortable. And so we move and we live to try to eliminate our discomfort and bring in more comfort. But the longer that we live, what we find is that getting exactly what we want still leaves us with things feeling like it's off, that things aren't right. And the more, and what we find is the more that we try to pursue the things that we think are going to make us comfortable, a lot of times that's hard to find. And so let's look at the next part of the text, the next couple of verses, where he says in verse 19, he says, for in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of the cross, and you who were once alienated and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds. Right? So he's saying we were once alienated and we had hostile minds that did evil deeds. Well, what's wrong with the world? Well, what this verse is telling us is that it's us. We are what's wrong. We have hostile minds and we do evil deeds, despite the fact that we are the crowning glory, that all of God's creation, we are the crowning glory. And despite the fact that we were created to live and to bring glory to God, to honor Jesus, that we instead become hostile towards the one by whom we were to live for and were created for. And what's wrong with the world, in short, is sin. Sin is what's wrong with the world. And so how does that make it right? Well, let's skip on to the next verse, the last verse here. How do we make this right? He says, Yet he has reconciled you in his fleshly body through death, in order to present you before him holy and blameless and beyond reproach. If indeed you continue in faith firmly established and steadfast, and not moved away from the hope of the gospel that you have heard, which was proclaimed in all under heaven, and of which I, Paul, was made a minister. How can it be made right? Well, this little word, yet, man, just one of the most beautiful words in the Bible. Man, can you imagine life without statements like this in scriptures that we find in these passages that weren't followed by yet, or nevertheless, or but, where he says, this is the way things are broken, they're wrong, yet he has reconciled. How can what's wrong be made right? Well, we see two things in this last step. First, that we see that what is wrong can be made right by Christ, his substitutionary death, right? Through his death, when he atones for our death, the death that we deserve, and he dies for us in our place. So he takes on a substitutionary role and dies for us where we should have. And the second is the statement in verse 23, when we see that it cannot be made right by any other means. That the supremacy of Christ in truth and redemption is found in his exclusivity. It's only him, right? Only him. Only he is able to do this. And this is what I mean. If we try to do things on our own, we're going to come across a couple of problems. The first problem is that when we try to do things and we just try to simply be good, what we find is that I can't be good, right? I can't do it. I'm incapable of it. I'm totally radically depraved. right? That there are things that I want to do that's good, and for some reason I keep stumbling over these things, and I keep finding them. And even when I do good things, what I find is that my motives are the wrong thing. That I might do something good for somebody, but the real reason that I did something good for somebody is simply because I wanted everybody to see and to cheer for me, or to cheer for those actions. And so I have the wrong motives, and any good that's in me can't really be good. And the second problem that we find is what about the things that we did before we came to Christ, right? What about all the evil things we did before we knew the truth? You know, how long do I have to live before those good deeds outweigh, you know, before how long before do I have to do good deeds before I can outweigh the bad ones that I've done in my past? You know, or how am I going to wash away those things that have already made me imperfect? You know, I can't do that. And then the third problem that we're going to find is in this assurance, is that if we're trying to do things on our own, we can never actually find any assurance, because how am I ever going to ultimately know that I've crossed the finish line? How am I ever going to know that I've done the best that I could do and that I was the best until I get there? And the only way we'll do that is we find out that when we find out the answer, and we find out that we've been doomed. And so the Bible says, for our sake, he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. It says that he became sin. The man who knew no sin became sin so that we might become the righteousness. He traded his righteousness for ours, and he died when we were supposed to. And so we're going to end this time of worship. And what I want you guys to think about is this idea that in the absence of truth, there is chaos, right? When there is no truth, there is chaos. And by definition, if something is not true, it's a lie. And lies are endless. They're all over the place. And there's lies are aplenty because they're just different variations of the truth. But there can only be one truth, right? You can't have multiple truths. You can only have one truth. And so there's infinite numbers of lies and there's one truth. And what this does is, in a world full of lies, and we feel this all the time, that there's this chaos and there's this brokenness, and we feel like we're in this ocean and we're being tossed by all the waves, that it says that he is the truth. And that truth doesn't change, and it's constant. And what it does is, in all this chaos and all this motion that lies and deceit bring upon us in this world, that we have something to hold on to, and that's the truth. That's him. And the truth is not just an idea, it's a person. He's saying, I am the truth, right? That we can personally possess truth because he's a person. He's a person that we can know. And so we should embrace truth like a relationship, not just a simple understanding. And so we're going to sing one last song. Let me pray for you guys, and then we'll sing one last song of worship, and then we'll jump on over to those questions. But I do want to say I really enjoy getting to see you guys. Man, I love the quips you guys had tonight, and just how creative you guys are, and just seeing the ways that you engage your minds. And so I'm hoping tonight that God is able to engage your mind, and you use your minds not like the Pharisees, who used their minds to manipulate what was for their own good and didn't really care for the truth, but would use their minds to be able to reason and know the truth, to know Jesus. And I've just so enjoyed getting to hang out with you guys tonight, and I long to be able to see you in person, and I'm hoping that we can do that very soon. Thank you guys for tuning in, and just remember, I would love for you guys to be inviting people. Maybe there's people out there that are missing out because they don't know this is going on, and maybe they're sitting at home and they would watch if somebody would just simply invite them. And so I just want to encourage you guys to be inviting people. Let me kick it over to Anna and Alicia. We'll worship and roll those questions, and we'll get out of here for tonight. Thank you guys so much. Miss you guys. Love you guys. Let me pray for you. Lord, I just thank you so much for, and just how incredible you are, Lord. You are just such a big God, Lord. And I just thank you that man, you've not left us to this world, Lord, that you were here before the creation of the world. Lord, that you were that rock. You were that standard before the world ever even got spoken into existence, Lord. and you are invisible, Lord, but thank goodness we have Christ, who is your image, Lord, that brings that image forth, and through him we can know the truth, Lord. It's out there, it's available for us if we would just embrace him, Lord. And I thank you that we don't live in this world that's absence of truth, where it's chaotic, where there's no morals, where there's no right and wrong, and it's just up to whatever we feel like doing, Lord. And just how chaotic that is, Lord. And I just thank you that we're not manipulative, and you drive those sort of things out, Lord. And so I just ask that you be that standard tonight, Lord. And I know it's difficult, Lord. I know it's difficult to follow your truth, and it's going to be difficult at times to stand up for truth, Lord, because sometimes it's easy. Right, like the Pharisees, we can look and we can reason and we can say, well, man, it's hard to profess the truth, but it's easy to profess a lie and to cover up the truth, to do what's good for our own comfort, Lord. But I just ask that you give us hope, and you be the rock in which we can walk through and we can embrace that truth, Lord, that we can just go out and we can do that, and we can trust that, hey, you've got us, you're with us, Lord. We're walking with you. The truth is not an idea, it's a person. And so we thank you for that. Amen.
Your